Hello and welcome to a new mod showcase episode for Farming Simulator 15. This time we are dealing with one of the most extensive mods for FS15, which changes the properties of the soil. In the stock game there's only one factor that affects the harvest, fertilizer, and it only checks if there is or isn't fertilizer on the field. We will show you how this mod changes that and how you can achieve an optimal harvest in a moment, so stay tuned. The modification soil mod can only be played on prepared mod maps. The soil management zip file usually comes with the map. If that's not the case, you can download it from the internet and put it in the mod folder. In the stock game there are, broadly speaking, two different layers of soil. The first is for normal plant grow, the second is for fertilized soil, which increases the yield of the harvest. The soil mod now adds more layers. The first layer represents the acidity of the soil, or to be more precise, the acidity of the moisture in the soil, the so-called pH value. The ideal pH value in our case is 6.8, at which the harvest yield will be 100%. If the value at the time of harvest is higher or lower, the yield will be reduced. There are various influences which change the pH value. Plant growth, weather crops or weeds reduce the value. Any application of fertilizer or herbicide reduces the value also. Lime in turn increases the value and can be applied specifically to counter acidic soil. Another layer is the moisture content in the soil, meaning how well the soil is watered. The ideal value is 57% at the time of harvest, here the yield is 100%. A different value reduces the yield accordingly. The moisture content is affected by weather, plant growth and liquids. High temperatures above 22 degrees C dry out the soil. Plants also consume water during their growth. Each liquid, be it water, liquid fertilizer, herbicide, manure or slurry, as well as weather conditions such as rain or hail, irrigate the soil and increase moisture. The next layer, already present in the stock game, relates to the nutrients in the soil. The mod now splits the layer into two, meaning two different types of nutrients, N and Pk. The ideal N value is 5, the ideal Pk value is 4. If the values differ from the ideal values, the yield of the harvest will be reduced. Basically, there are only two factors that affect the nutrients, plants and fertilizer. Doesn't matter if chemical or natural ones such as manure. Plants, whether crops or weeds, consume nutrients as they grow. In order to resupply the floor again, fertilizer, manure, slurry or compost can be put on or worked into the soil. Another layer refers to weeds, meaning unwanted plant growth, which takes nutrients and moisture out of the soil. Wheat doesn't grow uniformly but at different locations in the field, thus it quickly becomes an annoyance because it messes up the uniformity of nutrients in the field, which makes planning for an optimal harvest difficult. Weeds can be put into the soil with plows or cultivators. For more targeted control you can use herbicides to kill weeds. These can be sprayed over crops as well. To check the conditions of the soil there is an indicator which reflects the values of the place you are standing on. With the key combination left Alt plus I, you can switch between the display and a soil matrix. The matrix shows colored dots representing the quality of the soil. The represented values are pH, moisture and fertilizer, and Pk fertilizer. Let's always remember the following. These values are relevant at the time of harvest, meaning it requires good planning to prepare the soil during plant growth to reach the ideal values at the time of harvest. In the game there are two ways to work the soil, plowing and cultivating. There are 8 stages of growth, 5 of which have a different graphical representation. The modification changes the growth cycle to 1 time a day at midnight. This is shown at the top right. As soon as the cycle starts, a percentage indicator starts counting to 100. The temperature is checked at noon every day. The indicator will start counting to 100 if necessary, but that doesn't change the growth cycle. You can change the growth cycle manually by opening the savegame folder and searching for the career savegame XML file. If a growth cycle has been calculated in-game at least once, and the game has been saved afterwards, a new section called FMC Soil Mod will be present in the file. Here you can change the parameters. The growth cycle is set in the Interval in-game days section. Once that is done, the new interval is shown in the game on the top right. Growth affects all layers of the soil. Crops reduce the pH value of the soil as they grow, currently from the first to the second stage. Crops also need moisture and reduce the water content of the soil. This happens several times from sowing to harvesting, currently 3 times. Wheat, however, constantly consumes water, meaning at every growth cycle. The growth of plants affects the nutrient content of the soil, of course. Since there are 2 layers of nutrients, N and Pk, these are also used differently. The N layer is continuously used by crops and weeds. Crops take N nutrients from sowing to withering. Weeds just use N nutrients until none are present anymore. The Pk layer is only used by crops during their growth, currently only 1 time from first to second stage. The growth of crops can be negatively affected by spreading the wrong herbicide. If the plant is still in an early growth stage, it will pause its growth. If the plant is already ripe, it will be killed by the wrong herbicide. The growth of weeds can be prevented by several days by double-dosed herbicides. The soil mod adds a pH value to the soil, meaning the acidity of the moisture of the soil now affects harvest yield. Acidity ranges from acidic 5.4 to basic 8.5. The ideal value is 6.8, here you get 100% of the possible yield. There is a relatively large margin before yields start to suffer. The pH value of the soil is affected by the growth of plants, meaning while crops grow, they will lower the pH value in small increments. Using N fertilizer on the field will also reduce the pH value. Fighting weeds with herbicides will also reduce the pH value, X herbicides twice as much as ABC herbicides. You can now deploy lime on the field in order to counteract these effects. Certain devices, such as spreaders, can now be filled with lime and apply a coat of lime on the field. This is displayed graphically. Leaving the lime on the field will cause it to be integrated during the next growth cycle, increasing pH values and making it disappear graphically. One can also incorporate the lime into the soil by plowing or cultivating it, which increases the positive effect. Compost also has a positive effect on the pH value in the soil and increases it slightly. The soil mod considers how much moisture is in the ground, meaning how much liquid has been absorbed by the soil. The amount ranges from 0%, that is very dry, to 100% very wet. The ideal value is 57%, which results in 100% harvest yield. The range to achieve a good harvest is relatively low. Many different parameters affect the value, meaning it takes some planning to bring the value close to 57% at the time of harvest. Plant growth, whether crops or weeds, need water during their growth. Weeds need moisture even after they are ripe. Digging the soil up with a plow will reduce the moisture as well because it dries up. This can be counteracted by directly putting a liquid on the field after plowing. The weather now also plays a role in the game. If the temperature rises to 22 degrees C or higher, the moisture level goes down. The mod checks for the temperature each day at noon and calculates the value accordingly. Bad weather, rain or hail, now have a positive effect on the moisture in the soil. The mod now checks for rain or hail every hour and ups the value for each hour, which can lead to a very wet soil very fast. Any liquid which is applied on the field now increases the moisture in the soil, including water, slurry, liquid fertilizer and herbicide. The liquids can be applied with sprayers, slurry, with slurry tankers. Manure is a special case. When working manure into the ground, he fertilizes it, but doesn't increase humidity. Leaving it on the field, on the other hand, causes it to seep into the ground over 3 days, increasing moisture every day by 1 step. The soil mod separates manure, slurry and compost from regular fertilizers and provides them with their own identity. All 3 materials now have their own graphic representation, meaning when applied on the field they become visible. Manure has 2 possible effects on the ground. When applied on the field, it moisturizes the field over 3 days, dries out and disappears. It doesn't fertilize the field though. If it gets worked into the ground, however, by plowing or cultivating the field, it adds a large amount of nutrients, both N and Pk. Plowing is significantly more effective than cultivating. Slurry has a similar effect as chemical fertilizer and adds N nutrients and moisture to the field. It is not necessary to work it into the ground and has also no additional effect. Compost works like manure. Leaving it on the field adds moisture but no nutrients to the soil. Plowing it into the ground adds N and Pk nutrients and also raises the pH value slightly. Cultivating it only adds N and Pk nutrients in small amounts. The soil mod distinguishes between two fertilizer layers, N and Pk. There are three materials that act on these layers: fertilizer, natural fertilizer, and plants that get worked into the ground. Fertilizer consists of three varieties: N, Pk, and NPK. These varieties can be sprayed or sprinkled and, depending on the type, add certain amount of nutrients to the ground. Sprayed liquid fertilizer also adds moisture to the soil. Sprinkled dry fertilizer doesn't. Natural fertilizer like manure or compost act on the N and Pk layers. Slurry only on the N layer. More information on this can be found in the previous section. Plant remains of course carry nutrients as well and can therefore be used as fertilizer by working them into the ground. Crops that get plowed into the ground act on the N and Pk layer. If they get cultivated, they only act on the N layer. It's irrelevant whether the plants are still growing or are already withered. Mowing or harvesting crops or grass leaves swaths on the field. Plowing them into the ground adds to the N layer, cultivating them has a lower effect. The chopped straw mod leaves chopped plant remains on the field. Plowing chopped plant remains into the ground acts on the N and Pk layers. Corn residues give more nutrients than rape residues, which give more than straw. Cultivating plant remains only acts on the N layer and not very much. The soil mod adds unwanted plant growth to the game, meaning weeds. Wheat does not grow continuously, but only on certain points on the field, thus disturbing the uniform soil composition and becoming a nuisance very fast. Wheat consumes N nutrients and moisture, and this over long periods of time. The easiest way to remove weeds is to work them into the ground with plows or cultivators. Of course you can also use chemistry, meaning herbicide. Herbicide comes in 4 variants: A, B, C and X. Each type, X excluded, comes in 2 doses, single and double doses. Type X can be used to kill all plants, crops, weeds and grass. Doing this also removes all fertilizers and the pH value gets lowered. Types A, B, C are used for different crops and only kill weeds, but they also lower the pH value of the soil. Double doses of herbicide prevent regrowth of weeds for up to 3 days. Type A is suitable for everything except wheat, barley, rye, oat and rice. Type B is suitable for everything except corn, canola, OSR, alfalfa and clover. Type C is suitable for everything except potatoes, sugar beets, soya beans and sunflowers. Using harmful herbicide on a crop that is still growing causes the growth to be paused. If the plant is already ripe, it will be killed in the process. Wheat, if treated with herbicide, withers first and later disappears. In the following example we will show you a typical sequence of preparing the soil until time of harvest. Because soil values are relevant only at the time of harvest, it's necessary to plan the working steps accordingly to reach optimal values at the right time. We start on a map that has been prepared for the soil mod, in this case the North Shore map. Field 24 has already been cultivated for further use. The first step is to check the condition of the 4 soil layers, meaning we want to know the exact values shown in the info box. We activate the matrix with left alt plus I and run across the field to gain a rough idea on the uniformity of the values. We do this a few times, cycling through the layers with left alt plus I while keeping an eye on the info box. The result for field 24 is very uniform, meaning the values are 6.8 pH, 57% moisture, 4 N nutrient and 2 Pk nutrient. Step 2 is planning the work steps across the growth cycles. We want to grow wheat, which will take 4 days to ripen. Since we don't have much to do, we want to harvest as soon as possible. We have 4 working days to prepare the ground and will harvest on day 5. So we begin determining the consumption rates of crops, in our case wheat, which will use 0.2 pH, 3 times moisture, 4 times N nutrients, 2 times PK nutrients. We must take the weather into account too. We open the weather forecast with the IK. The harvest will be ready on Friday and see that the temperature will rise above 22 degrees C 2 times, meaning moisture will be consumed 2 times, so we add that to plant consumption on our list. Weed is also an issue. We will make use of double dose herbicide B, which is suitable for wheat to prevent weed growth for 3 days. Herbicide will reduce the pH value by 0.2, we add that to our list too. The good thing about herbicide, it adds moisture to the soil. Of course we need fertilizer, both N and PK. We will deploy liquid NPK fertilizer 2 times, that will give us 6 N and 2 PK and 2 times moisture. We now calculate consumption and the effects of the working steps to get an idea on how the soil will look like on harvest day. We notice that the soil will get sour. We can compensate that with lime, so we schedule that. In addition, moisture is lacking. We will need to compensate that by applying another dose of herbicide, which will also reduce the pH value a bit, and that suits us too. The N nutrients will be a bit too high, but we can live with that. We can now make the final work step list over 4 days, taking into account that fertilizer and herbicides cannot be applied at the same time. Now there's only one thing to do, working through the list. The next day we see how the wheat has begun to grow. Our soil values now are 7.3 pH, 57% moisture, 3 N, 2 PK. On the third day we have the following soil values: 7.1 pH, 43% moisture, 5 N, 2 PK. On day 4 the plants are almost fully grown. The soil values are 7.1 pH, 43% moisture, 7 N, 3 PK. Day 5, the day of harvest, the wheat has matured and the soil values are as follows: 6.8 pH, 43% moisture, 6 N and 2 PK. We dedicate day 5 to the harvest and get 15,621 liters of wheat at the end. This is very close to the optimal values. More information and links can be found in the video description. If you liked the tutorial, leave us a comment here or on Mod Hoster or the usual channels.